Welcome to LUTV News InFocus, where we feature interesting topics on campus, in the community, and in the world of culture. I am Chandler Smith. We all look up to the stars and dream of Mars. O'Brien Stanley, one of the authors of Martian Pictures, Analyzing the Cinema of the Red Planet, is here to talk about his book, as well as what movies about Mars have to say about us as a society. O'Brien, thank you for stopping by and talking to us for a while.
Glad to be here.
Sure. So, the first thing that we should address is people who don't know, what is a brief synopsis of what this book is?
You got it. I want to point out I got three other co-authors, Steve Zani, Dr. Nikki Mahalski, terrific collaborator, and Lane Roth, worked with them. And yeah, if you haven't read the book, it's concerned with, on a deep level, what do these movies about Mars, kind of like a sample, what is this sample of movies about one place, what do they say to us about our society? Because we're sending our society to Mars. We either send a version of our society to Mars, or we meet a Martian society. But of course the Martian society is really kind of a reflection of us, of how we feel about ourselves at any given time. And so we look at both groups of societies, the Martian society we meet and also the societies we send up. And from looking at those societies, we can learn about ourselves and our society at any given moment in time, because all of that changes. You've got Martian in 1924, you've got the Russians with Alita on Mars, and their version of Mars was not a worker's paradise, but they tried to become a worker's paradise, reflecting the communism, the Marxism that was set in that was in Russia when they made that film. And then you cut to the 50s, 60s, 70s, and you get the different versions of America as we project our image onto Mars. Mars is kind of like a canvas or a mirror that reflects who we are at any given moment in time.
Why do you think so many filmmakers from the 20s with the Russians all the way to now with The Martian with Matt Damon, why do you think so many filmmakers chose Mars as a location to express who we are as a society? Why do you think Mars was the place to...
the focus? Mm-hmm. That's a super question. And that even changes. Mars, we speculated that when Dr. Mahalski and I were working on the very first chapters, we speculated that why Mars? It was because it was the closest, most practical place to get to. The moon, even when filmmakers were making films about space in the 30s, we knew the moon was a dusty, dry rock. But Mars, there was that possibility that maybe life was there. So it was the first, most practical place to get to. And of course, when you're making films in the 40s and 50s, going to Mars was like an interstellar trip at that time. It was imaginable, but it was a very far thing at that time. But then, once we actually go to the moon, then we change our focus as a society, and we stop going to Mars. So if you look at the 70s and 80s, there's not many Mars films. Star Trek kind of started that out. Mars, by the time we go to the moon, Mars is kind of like a little bit old hat. Even though we've never been there, we're imagining going way further. So you get Star Trek in the 60s and 70s, not going to Mars. All the movies are going past Mars. But then it's interesting. In the 90s, late 90s, all of a sudden you had 3 movies at one time that came out about Mars. And that's what got us interested in the very first chapter of the book. It was Ghosts of Mars, Red Planet, and Mission to Mars by Brian De Palma. All came out within about 3 months of each other. And Nikki Mahalski and I looked at each other and thought, what is going on with Mars? And our speculation is that we never really did the Star Trek thing, much as I would love to do that. But all of a sudden in the 90s, it's like we're pulling back and being a little more practical. We're not going back to the moon. We haven't been to the moon by 2000. We haven't been to the moon in 25 years. And all of a sudden Mars is seeming practical and even hard to get to. And there have been even more movies since then, like The Martian, that's set on Mars.
Is there something that ties Martian movies, like a theme or something reoccurring that ties Martian movies from the 20s to now? Is there something that you've seen throughout the Martian films that is a reoccurring thing, or has it really changed with the time completely? Or is
That's
there
a great
something left
question.
over?
And I've been thinking about that. A reoccurring theme certainly is a struggle to live, a struggle to survive. That's behind everything. Because even in the 50s, there were very few movies that speculated you could live without a suit, you could live without air. We knew enough about Mars to know that the atmosphere is incredibly thin. So there's a struggle to survive. But there are a lot of differences between the different, between the different societies on Mars and our version of a society. Sometimes we go as we know better than the Martians, and other times the Martians have lessons to teach us. So there really are a lot of variables. Some of the most interesting films are when the Martians have lessons to teach us. And then you get into Ray Bradbury and the Martian Chronicles, or Rocket Ship XM, one of the first very serious, low-budget film. It's a diamond in the rough, but it really teaches a lesson about how we can survive as a species. Just real quick on that film, it comes out in 1950, middle of the Cold War, and the film is making a message against weapons of mass destruction, which is amazing to think of a film back then. When just at that time when we're just thinking we've got to use nuclear weapons, it's saying no. Look at what the nuclear weapons did to Mars. So you get some interesting political themes that come out.
Sure. And on a final note, do you see there as an evolution of the Martian Pictures as it started to where it is now? Did you see an evolution, maybe in values or themes? Was like the westerns, like the revisionist westerns? Was there something similar to?
Are there revisionist Martian? Yeah, that's a good point. I think yes. I think our trips to Mars are much more scaled down. We're much more, instead of a conquering nation, or we're much more grateful to be there. What can we learn from Mars? And you see that in The Martian. It's much more of a meeting with the planet instead of we're going to take the planet over.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your information. It was really, really excellent. And you can find a copy of Martian Pictures Analyzing the Cinema of the Red Planet on Amazon. Thank you so much for watching LUTV News in Focus. To see more content from LUTV News, follow us on Twitter and like us on Facebook.